Hi, Thomas. How are you?
I'm very good, Neil. The weather's improved greatly here today, so you'll be getting some great weather tomorrow in your part of the world.
Send it across. Yeah.
Feeling a spring in bulk coming, and I'm going to go for a walk after this is over in the woods because it's now safe again to walk there. There's no ice on the rocks and stuff. So, yeah, definitely, there's definitely a feeling of spring in the air. So it's yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah. Well, thanks for all the rain. Yeah, cheers for that.
Well, you'll be okay tomorrow.
We will. Okay. So we're on to. I was going to ask you I'm thinking. Things in over here at the moment is very much talking about opening up. You know, when you can hear subtle changes in the government, and it's you see. I don't know whether it's anything to do with the American election or because he started talking about the tests being not fit for purpose, and now they're talking about who's going to apologise for what, who's going to. So they're talking about who's going to be held responsible, and no, it's not quite ready yet to talk about it. So it seems, that things are moving in that direction, and we've said there's going to be a meeting in the middle of February. So because there's a meeting on the 15th of February, he can tell us what happened at the meeting on the 26th of February. He'll have to sit there and we'll think about it for 2 weeks, and then tell us. And then that was my Jack Boots Johnson impression, not very good one. And then they reckon fully open by May for hotels and things, which means I can start on tours around Britain anyway. So what any ideas of?
There's still fear mongering big time here. And they said their current restrictions are in effect till the 5th of March. And though there are, like you said, they're ramping up the fear porn really bad. You think that everyone was dying of COVID right now, the way the media is carrying on. This is the civil servants and the bureaucrats actually trying to get their last feeding of energy off the rest of us. On the opening front, it was interesting. There was an article yesterday about the hotels in Ireland and the hoteliers and the hospitality industry. And they were saying things like they're expecting a boom summer if everything goes well. So it's almost like somebody had a word with them on the side saying that don't worry about it, it's going to be a great summer for you guys. So at least maybe that the tourist industry native wise is probably going to open up, which is good for everyone really, because a lot of people are going nuts stuck at home. I think a lot of it had to do. I mean, did you watch that World Economic Forum video yesterday from Davos? They said they put out this kind of, Dave Cullen did a review of the whole thing, but they also put out their propaganda video saying that, we're going to run your lives and it's going to be wonderful, and we're the same people who screwed up the world, but we're the ones who'll fix it again. This crap. And then showing people like George Bush Jr., Al Gore, Putin, Greta Thunberg, and the head of the IMF, and Angela, and these people being held up as if they're wonderful human beings who everybody loves. They're so delusional. But all through their own promo video, all they kept talking about was the pandemic is an opportunity. The pandemic is an opportunity, which is basically admitting that the pandemic was a setup. The globalists got together and set this thing up. They knew it was just a regular flu, and they sexed it up into the lockdowns and everything else to try and get what they wanted. And I'm absolutely now convinced more than ever it was a huge part of that was to get people to not go to the polling stations to vote for Trump. I think that was a huge part of it. And I know it sounds very conspiratorial, but I'm convinced of it now. And another aspect too was the amount of people who thumbed down and savaged that video in the comments. Like they had to actually, like the videos of Biden's acceptance speech, YouTube had to shave off tens of thousands of thumbs downs. And the comments are fantastic. They're literally everything the same people we know talk about. The pandemic, you guys caused the lockdown, you guys ruined the world, you're a bunch of scumbags. I mean, really not only just hateful, but you could tell there were comments by ordinary people who are not politically active, who are now very well aware of what these people are up to with the Great Reset. So I came away from it feeling very, very hopeful, very hopeful.
Well, that's a really good thing, isn't it? Yeah, that people are, because you don't necessarily have to wake up to everything that's happened in the world to realize that you've been screwed over, do you?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just that's the problem with a lot of this conspiracy sort of gurus is that they make everything a conspiracy. When in reality, all you have to do is make one particular thing that impacts people's lives and amplify that and amplify the bullshit around it. And people, ordinary people, they don't want to know about other things. They're not interested in other stuff, but they'll wake up to that, and you'll get them activated on that. And that's all you need. That's all you need,
isn't it? Just that one thing. You don't have to realize anything about the banking system or all the other stuff. They just want to get back to some sort of activity again, really. I'll tell you what made me laugh, which is probably it's just my sixth sense of humor, I think, really. But there was, our so-called opposition, so-called leader, Starmer. Well, he's now in his third 2-week self-isolation. And I just remembered, so that a couple of months ago, and he said that he was giving hell to the Prime Minister, saying, this track and trace system doesn't work. It's not fit for the purpose. You should have done this. You should have done all the stuff that they always do. And so then he got one lockdown, then he got another one. And I just imagine the end of the cabinet meeting. There any more business? Well, not really. I can't think of anything. Let's play Starmer again, shall we? Yeah, go on. I think we'll get away with another one. Mr. Starmer, he's having to isolate for another 2 weeks. Oh, really? Stitched up. It just made me laugh.
Farcical. Is, yeah. And here you have, like in England, here our version of BBC here, they were all caught at having a party back at the TV studio without masks or social distancing. Yeah. And all they do is go on TV and say, we're sorry, it won't happen again. Well, there should be a file sent to the prosecutor. That's the same thing. One law for them, another law for us. Well, same with Neil Ferguson in England. Why wasn't he arrested?
Oh, he's sticking his head above the water again. Just one thing I will never understand why anybody ever listens to that guy who's got everything he's done in his life wrong.
Yeah, no, he's a lot of these. Well, it's these people living in that. You see that very much. I'll put the link below the video when I make this. No, I haven't actually. I did another video, but of the Davos promo video. And these people are beyond delusional. They're psychotic. They're actually mentally ill. They actually believe that we love them all, that we adore them, that we worship Klaus Schwab and Greta Thunberg, the Swedish doom potato. They actually think we think they're wonderful people. And Bono singing is not what we really want. What we want is really Bono the politician. It's like they're out of their minds. These people, they're out of their minds.
We've got no insight whatsoever, have they? I tell you what was scary. I think it might have been on Dave Cullen's show again, where they showed the Chinese Communist Party shows
the
UN thing. Did you see that?
Oh, that gave me the creeps. That did.
Gave me the creeps. Big style.
The UN. Do you remember I remember back in the 70s, have all these survivalists while reading about them as a young kid. But later on, I read a book about it was about the history of kind of like the sort of like underground in America, like survivalists and everything, but it was told from a kind of a mainstream point of view. I read this in the 90s, and they spoke about in the 1970s, there was all the survivalists had a belief that the United Nations was not a peacekeeping force, but actually a real military force, a worldwide security force that would actually come after you eventually. And that video the Chinese made, that was it. That was a call to war. That was a call to war. Yeah.
He's saying this is the world's government. We're the world army, and you will now do as we say, more or less.
And especially at the end of the video, where they all charge out towards, and you notice how they all kind of disperse at the end to the four corners of the world, the Chinese troops. About 5 years ago, and I did a blog post on it. I'll definitely put this below. I had a dream, a very powerful dream, that I was in the center of Dublin, and there was an absolute war going on, and it was locked down with not war, but like civil disturbances, shall we say? And there was foreign troops on the streets, and people couldn't get to the hospitals because the foreign troops didn't understand English and things like that. And I'm starting to think now, this is more and more like a prophetic dream, that they flood your country with soldiers who don't speak the local language. So therefore, like, this is why half the Irish army are in Africa or in, Indonesia or somewhere like that. And Indonesian troops are often somewhere else. They flood your country with troops that can't speak your language. There's a civil order breakdown where your own troops might go, oh, Jesus, let that woman through. She'll have a miscarriage. You'll have some guy who go, no comprende, this kind of thing, or, a really different language, And I think it's quite frightening. When I saw those Chinese troops, it's almost like the UN said to the Chinese, you're now the army of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is why I used to worry about the EU army, because if anybody, if the whole idea is that you won't end up with your own troops on your streets, you'll end up with, it's a bit like Rome again, isn't it, really? Because the Eastern Europeans that were in the Roman army then.
I mean, look how well that worked out in Northern Ireland. It was a disaster. And there isn't a huge cultural difference between British and Irish people. Now, imagine
absolutely, no, not at all.
Bulgarians on the streets. I'm not putting down Bulgarian people or anything, but just the cultural difference is enormous.
Absolutely, yeah.
It makes it much worse. But that's what they want.
Won't feel that kinship, will they? That's the thing.
Yeah. Our sympathy as a young soldier. I can remember like going through Northern Ireland during the Troubles, with bands with friends, and you'd get stopped by British troops, and they'd be kind of like, some of them were quite friendly and like laid back. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, we're just going. We're band. We're playing up in Belfast. Can I see your gear? Yeah. And they'd look at your gear, and you could speak English to them, And then they'd see the amplifiers and the speakers and stuff, and they close the van and they say, "Okay, lads, off you go. Just be careful." The language, the communication of language. As soon as they realised you're just in a band, they were nice. They were less harsh. They weren't nasty or anything, but less harsh. But imagine a situation where you try and explain that you're in a band to someone who doesn't speak English, who speaks Mandarin or Cantonese.
Not going to work, is it? No. So it doesn't bode well for the future.
Well, I would say that until I saw the quotes on the comments on that video by the Davos video. That gave me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, because everything has got to come to its fruition.
They always roll their dice too far.
Absolutely, yeah.
They also don't have a charismatic leader. This is why they went after Trump. Trump is charismatic. The ordinary person can look at him. Where there's no, someone like Al Gore, you look at that, what's that thing? Or Greta Thunberg, no teenage girl could relate to her. They are, the rest of them, they Klaus Schwab, they don't have the charisma of, say, you had like the Roman Empire. From what I've read about the likes of Julius Caesar, he had phenomenal charisma, and people, he was the guy who could talk to the peasant in the street as much as they could to like foreign kings, and that's why the people loved them. And he would fight on the battlefield with them. These are all people that are away up in their mansions giving orders, and that's always been through history a recipe for catastrophe for them.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like, it definitely seems like we're getting somewhere. I really do. It just seems like it's in the atmosphere now. It seems like we're getting to some point where things are going to ease up. I was going to say why, but I can't remember. But what we need is a new emperor, don't we? And
it's funny. That's a beautiful segue. A proper Julius Caesar. Yeah. So today's card, I'll start off because this one's on my video. I think my channel this time. Yeah. So I'll run with this one first this time. So the Emperor. Okay, this is the Italian deck. And this is how he's shown in the heathen otherworld, or I think it's called pagan otherworld now. Now, the Emperor represents, it's a very much a left brain concept. He is the aspect of logic and reason. He represents authority through power that's achieved within the material world. In many of the Rider-Waite and other decks, he stands in all these two as well. He's shown outdoors. He's not indoors. Here he's shown as a kind of tribal elder. He's always shown outdoors to signify the world of power. Yeah, he's thrown as outdoors to signify the world of power. and the world of logic and reason. Now, he's not cold, he's not brutal, he's just represents the left brain. Of course, he's balanced by the Empress on the right brain, which we saw last week, but he represents analytical logic, the concept of the fool now having to survive in the material world. He's got the imaginative and the compassionate elements of his mother and the female aspects. The anima, he now moves into the animus, and he now has to learn how to use logic and reason in order to survive in the material world and to become the emperor of his own domain. The emperor being number 4. 4 is a number that often represents structure. We spoke about 3 last week is movement, where 4 represents it's locked into a structure. 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 square meals. The 4 squared. You have like 4 is a common number used in literature and mythology. The 4 ancient treasures of Ireland, of the 2 they down. The 4 Grail treasures, the 4 books of the gospel. I believe it's also 4 books of the Quran. It represents bang bang structure. It's a solid form. It's like built like a house. So he represents the 4 corners of the world that he rules over. Now, in the traditional decks, like the Italian deck and the Tarot de Marseille, he's often pictured with an Eastern Orthodox crown, which gives a lot of credence to my theory that I still don't think people should give up on the idea of the tarot having come from the East via the Gypsies. He's often portrayed as an Orthodox king. So he's be closer to a Tsar or a Caesar. He's holding a scepter, the symbol of power. He's also associated strongly with the eagle. The eagle represents the state, the bureaucracy, but also the internal bureaucracy as well, the system of control, heavily associated with the Holy Roman Empire. Again, in this card, he's represented very closely to Frederick II of Germany, who was basically the king who conquered the whole of the East. That's why the Germans, so many people speak German, they did before World War II, heading out into the East. And again, he is on the positive side, he gets things done. He holds the system together. He's cold, he's hard, he's analytical. On the negative side, he can represent cruelty. Not cruelty, but extreme conservatism that can actually destroy and make things much worse. He is the fool now becoming a man, and now understanding that there's an element of the fool now has to control the world through logic and reason. He can also represent a fall from grace. If this goes wrong, the empire collapses, or this kind of thing. He reminds me, actually, the more I read about him and think about the emperor, I think a lot about Napoleon. Napoleon in the English-speaking world, mainly because of propaganda following the Battle of Waterloo, it is held up very badly. But he's portrayed very badly as this sort of like short control freak, and he was nothing like that at all. He was actually a brilliant intellectual man, and who actually had a spirit guide or a daemon. That's a very interesting part. We'll talk about that in our part of him. So yeah, so the emperor represents the and also in the esoteric, he's associated heavily with Uranus, the planet, and Uranus in a mating position with Gaia, the Earth Mother Goddess, producing the logic and material forces of the universe impacted upon the spiritual and the emotional forces of the earth, coming together to create the material world. So again, order out of chaos. This is his job. His job as the emperor is to bring order out of chaos in that kind of Masonic sense. That's the emperor from how I see him.
Yeah, brilliant. I love the idea of the order. That's very, very fundamental to my way of looking at it as well, because to me, he's reason, and we've got. I'll send you one of these, and you can stick it up. But you've got the Hebrew letter, you've got the number of the Hebrew letter and the name and everything, and it all adds up to the same idea of reason and order. But number 4 is the whole idea of number 1, which was the magician, and that's the idea of putting, as we said, we're putting our thoughts into the subconscious and feeding them down into the through self-consciousness. Put your idea in there, sending it down into the subconscious, And we said, like last week, we ended up with fruition, which was everything, the pregnancy of ideas and thoughts and everything from the empress. So you ended up with 1 plus 3, which is 4, which means basically what we're saying there is that until the ideas went in and then they came out, and you had, and then you ended up with results of ideas here. So now it's what you're going to do with these results, because the emperor couldn't really exist until the empress, that's why it didn't come first, had, it's like they say, until it had children, until she had children for the emperor to look after. Well, the children really means the ideas and thoughts and outcomes from whatever you wanted to an answer from your what you put into the magician, or your questions, what you wanted to result of. So that's what the magician is. He's now the person that will take charge of the results. And this is what can make me very unpopular, because it's kind of something that has to be said, that a lot of sort of new age religion type thing that doesn't really have any structure of training behind it misses this out, because reason is a man-made faculty not a man-made, but it's a faculty of this plane that we are on. And so many sort of new age ideas are that you'll just get this idea in your head and you don't run it through your own reason. You end up going off in all silly directions and making a fool of yourself and making a disaster of things, because that's basically what our emperor is. The Hebrew letter, again, we said we were in a house because what was it? Beth was the Hebrew letter from our chat here. Then we had a window, which was Daleth, and now we've got we had a door, which was Daleth, and now this means window, because the other thing that is relevant to the emperor is sight. So, and sight is a bit like, you might say, as you'll think about what's coming to you as a result. You say, "Oh, I see." So that's where sight comes from, and that's the idea of the window. So I'll go through some of the symbolism of the card. Okay. So we've got so we know the bottom bit now. So red is Mars again. So you've got the power, the energy of Mars, because he's a ruler. And Aries is associated with Mars. It rules over Aries. And you can see lots of little Arieses. You've got on the top of his helmet, you've got an Aries on his shoulder and also on the side of the cube. And the cube he sits on is, like you said before, Thomas, it's the cube of, cube always represents the earthly plane, like a completion, a foundation. And 4, the number 4 again is, remember we said we had 1 which was a spot in space, 2 was a line, 3 created a shape as a triangle. Now you've got 4, which is another element in another point in space. So now you've got an actual shape. It's not a flat 3. It's not flat anymore. Now it's an actual shape. So that means we're actually getting somewhere with our ideas. They're actually coming into fruition, and now we're forming them into a reality. You know, like you might have, for example, a board meeting in a company, and you would say, like, I've got this idea. I think we should invest in such and such a thing. Well, you would sit down, wouldn't you, and you would reason it out, and then you would form an actual plan. So that's where we're getting to on this. Red and gold of Hermes, the scepter. Now you remember in the Empress we had the female sign in the scepter. Well, this is upside down, so now we've got the male sign. But of course, it means dominion, as does the globe. But the globe is a very, very, very powerful sign of dominion, and it's red again, so that's the power of Mars again. But it's also got the letter T upside down. Now T is Tath, and it's that represents Saturn. Now remember we said Saturn is, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Saturn is very much restriction, and it's what's the other word? Restriction, constraint, and stopping things. But what we've got here is the upside down, which means that we've got power and dominion over Saturn. So again, he's a powerful leader. He's said to be the Ancient of Days because of his grey beard, and he's got the one eye, which is for the same reason, because the Ancient of Days is always shown side on. Well, he's not on. He is on this, but many other cards like the Rider-Waite is full on there. But his body shape's interesting what they've done here, because you'll see you've got a triangle at the top with his shoulders and up to the top of his helmet. So you've got a triangle, and then you've got a cross at the bottom. Now this represents sulfur, and in the ancient wisdom, sulfur is that powerful burning energy which you use to get through a subject, to get to the nitty gritty of it. You got the stream as well going through. Again, we said the stream started off at the high priestess robe, and it's a vibratory energy. And now the armor is violet. Now what we're saying here is this represents Jupiter. So we've got that amazing thing that we talked about a few years ago when we had the line of Jupiter and Saturn fighting against each other, and this represents it now. So a very powerful way of looking at it. The only other thing is the red of the mountain in the background is it's mineral, it's in indigenous rock, but it's also red, sort of powerful, a powerful Mars energy again. So he really is a powerful guy. But to kind of sum the whole thing up, you're looking at reason. So whatever you get, if you get a thought in your mind that you think has come from as a result of your previous work, think it out, get into the depth of it. Don't just take it as oh, this must be right. Try and look into what is the symbolism behind it to you. You look through the thing, try and get the basic of it. Look beyond any sort of superficial ideas of it, and try and feed through sort of what you call the divine reason. And if you do that, then you should be able to implement this in your life, or even put it back into subconsciousness and try again. One last thing, it's you can look at it as above, so below, on the macro and the macro and the macro or micro level. Okay, so on the macro level, we can see it as things that are happening now. We've got things, ideas coming to you. You've got it from the media, from other people, from the government, all sorts of things feeding you. You've got to remember the idea that the world evil is always from the disorderly thinking on superficial of people on superficial level. That's what creates everything as well. So if people are thinking things, if the mass of people are thinking on a disorderly level, this is what can create whatever goes wrong in the world. Building wisdom is the idea on your own personal level. So reason, sight, insight again. The idea of calling things by their real names is the basis of wisdom. So if you can read and get to the bottom of whatever it is whatever it is you've got in your mind, then you'll be able to call it by its true name and see what it actually is. So I would say basically that's my emperor. I've got two emperors. Sorry,
I like what you said. I like what you said about them sitting on the square block. That also ties into the esoteric, mainstream esoteric things like Freemasonry, the cornerstone. And he is the cornerstone of the empire, and that's transferred into Freemasonry as the cornerstone of the building and so on, where they have those ceremonies where they put oil and fat on the stones when they lay the cornerstone. That's a really interesting point. Someone once described the Emperor card to me as like a hydroelectric dam on a powerful river. The river flows, like you said, in the stream. It's a wild energy. He is the dam, and the dam generates electricity from that. I always thought that was a very good analogy, that he's like a hydroelectric dam on a mighty river.
Well, you
Uh,
said a dam
he
would
tamed
also
that.
stop the flow. It flows in there, sorry.
Yep, control the flow,
Yeah,
as well as so he'd let the water through when he needed. So he represents the not only the taming of those sort of spontaneous sort of right brained ideas that you were talking about, the New Age folks that they tend to run with without analyzing. He represents the taming of natural forces
exactly.
for not necessarily bad reasons, but for the purpose of power, really, I guess. So I remember that one time I was upstate New York at Niagara Falls, and there's a Tesla built this dam there in the 1930s or 20s, and Nikola Tesla's hydroelectric dam is there, and this thing is like a bloody temple. It was like, you can definitely see how, and there's a big statue of Tesla there, so you can definitely see that why he developed this mystique about him. He had that kind of element to him as well, the taming of the natural forces through logic. And what you were saying is very true about these New Age folks who, oh, I had a great idea and I'm going to go with it without actually thinking about it, or rushing into a relationship. Or so they could also represent things like running into a relationship without, let's give it time, this kind of thing. Let's not run into this too soon. He can represent that, and you'll often find the same people, those same folks, are the ones who say you must demolish your ego. Well, if you demolish your ego, you demolish the emperor.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the structure breaks down. That's why you get so much sort of psychic issues with New Age people, is because they've had this nonsense fed to them. The ancient yogis and swamis didn't tell people to demolish the ego. They told them to tame the ego, which is very much the emperor, to tame it, not to be a victim of it, or to be discarded.
Yeah.
This is one of the great, the same people have a yin and yang on their wall, turn around and say, you must demolish the ego, man. This kind of thing. Nonsense, pure nonsense, and dangerous nonsense as well.
It is dangerous nonsense, absolutely. The trouble is that it's not the New Age religion isn't a proper training system, and so they come up with an idea and they don't go behind the idea and find out what it's really on about, because you need your personality your ego is your personality, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And so, but you need that to live on this plane. We're here, It's like reason. We need reason, because without it, we can make an absolute fool of ourselves. We can be absolute disaster, and you see it, don't you?
Well, you see them say things like, he's got a big ego. But if you look at the greatest teachers in this world, people from Joseph Campbell to who was an Olympic level road racer, competitive, as well as a great thinker, he had a huge ego. So and but a positive ego. So had Carl Jung, a massive ego. Oscar Wilde had a massive ego. Good God, these people really helped the human race in so many ways. They had huge egos for a reason, because they needed to help the rest of us. And this nonsense of destroy or kill your egos is just so awful. It's just so awful.
And the daft thing, we need an ego, basically. Without an ego, what they mean is they don't like the particular ego that they've got.
Yeah.
So what they'd rather have is a holier than thou ego that just looks a little bit down on everybody else, because they're not quite as holy as thou. That's a better ego to have.
I always think of like that. There's a big correlation between born again Christianity and these New Age types, because ultimately it's about, I'm better than you, I'm saved, I'm judging you.
Yeah.
You get a lot of this nonsense. You get an awful lot of this nonsense. And I'm spiritual now. I'm better than you because I'm spiritual. This bullshit, And a lot of this is the same kind of personality types. They don't really know. They haven't really discovered who they are themselves. So they spend the rest of their lives kind of like moving from one New Age fix to the next, or one cult or one system to the next. And each one is the ultimate. Each one they find is the one. That's it. This is the one. And yet they spend their time judging people who are not on the same team as them at the moment. And it's a very common thing in society, very, very common. And this is because people are not explained in the education system how to become their own emperor or empress. They're not told that.
Yeah, well, we'll get eventually to the chariots, and that talks about this very thing. The chariot is the ego and the person, which is your personality, which is how you interact with the world and everything around you. You need that, but the charioteer is the thing before your ego. But without the chariot, you need it to exist. But
maybe at a future point we'll do a show on the whole thing of the ego and stuff like that. Or do a whole big talk on that. But actually, it's funny you mentioned the chariot, because after this point, the tarot gets really interesting for me. I think it's better. It gets much more interesting from 5 on, and so that's there's a lot more good stuff coming up in terms of that. So don't forget to subscribe to both channels. And hit the notification bell.
System, isn't it? The whole thing is just the way it all weaves together and plays on each other and works off each other. It's absolutely amazing. So, shall we move on to which is my favourite film?
Yep. I'll let you kick this off.
Casablanca. Well, I've loved Casablanca all my life. I'm not really a great film critic, but I've been watching it for years, and I just love the way it sort of, but it plays off. It changes. It's on different levels, isn't it? It changes backwards and forwards, all the way through, and from the beginning right through to the end, where it even speeds up, doesn't it? Because the last bit before he gets on the plane, and that goes backwards and forwards so quickly, it almost flickers like a metronome, and the characters all go through their own little journey as well through the whole thing. But give us your insights, because you're a better critic than I am.
I absolutely love the film. I think it's a very interesting history behind it. It was a stage play that was produced, and the director of the film, the producers, read it and said, "We have to buy this and turn it into a movie." I think the original was set in the south of France, and it was written by someone who had been in Vichy, France during the occupation. And that's where he got the idea for this. So, and at the time, he sold it for something like $15,000, which is like nearly $500,000 today in today's money, just for the screenplay. But what I like about the film is that it's unashamedly a black and white movie. It really plays on the use of light and shadow. In fact, as the movie progresses towards the end, you notice that the film noir aspects get more and more severe. It gets the contrast, and also, Humphrey Bogart really demonstrates what a fantastic actor he is, because at the beginning he uses very little words, and he speaks in an almost methodical way. And towards the end of the movie, his tempo of his words are going faster. He builds that film up like a steam engine. Steam train progressing. And it just, that film, when it came out, was just a regular film. They weren't expecting it to be a big hit or anything. And the studio was shocked at how successful it was and how quickly it became. But it's a very spiritual film, in the sense that here's the guy, Rick. He's heartbroken after losing Ingrid Bergman. And she walked out on him, and then he's like, he has this bitterness, because that's why he doesn't want to hear the song as time go by. And she comes into the bar, his American bar in Morocco, in Casablanca, and it goes from being very painful and very bitter for him to realizing the reason why she walked out is because she thought her husband was dead. This guy, Victor Laszlo, who was a Czech kind of dissident, but he was in a concentration camp and managed to escape. And she found that he was still alive, and that's why she left Rick. It wasn't because anything wrong with Rick. And then Rick has this kind of cathartic healing process where he realizes, oh, she's not a bad person after all. Or, I would probably do the same if I found out my wife was still alive or something like that. Well, so she thought she was a widow when she was with him. So that was kind of his crossover into the threshold. And from that point on, he's working with them to try and get Victor Laszlo out to America through Portugal. So he begins his own hero's journey. Before that, he's just a bit of a local gangster, a small-time gangster in Casablanca, working with the corrupt police and German officials. But then he transcends the material world and enters into the kind of almost a spiritual path of his own redemption, his own healing. And at the very end, that's why he lets he lets them go on the airplane and they fly off. It's almost like he had to do this. And when he says to Claude Rainier, playing the policeman Louis, he says, "I think this is the start of a beautiful friendship." After he shot Strasser, the Gestapo guy, dead, that was almost like him shooting himself. The parts of himself he had to kill. And then he said Louis represents his next stage on the hero's journey, that he's transcended his pain and his hurt of losing his woman to Victor Laszlo. And it's a simple story, but I think that's what made it appeal to so many people, because it really brought home that those simple stories, like in the Shakespearean way, are the most powerful ones. That it's like we've all been through this experience that he's been through, and he found healing. He found healing by realizing that it was nobody's fault in the end. It was just circumstances, and she just literally had to walk away. And whether he was bitter at her, an awful term they use these days, closure. I hate that term, but it's he didn't get his closure, and that made him bitter and angry because of these unanswered questions. But when he realized the circumstances that she was trapped within, and that she what that was about, he found healing. So it's a very mature film. There's a lot of maturity in that. There's a lot of. I'd suggest people watch that film and then apply Rick's path to their own existence, and you'll find that I think that's why it hits so many ordinary people right here in the heart watching that film. Not only the fact that it looks beautiful.
You can as he feels what he feels, you can understand it, can't you?
Yeah,
he goes through that, like I said, that sort of character arc all the way from the beginning to the end. He starts off. First, he's like madly in love. They're in Paris, and the army are marching in, and he's listening. Sam's playing the piano, and it's a wonderful love scene there. And then when he gets to the train, and he's waiting for it, and Sam brings a bit of paper, and it says she's not coming, and then it rains, and all the ink on the paper, so all the ink on the paper runs down, and you can feel that, can't you? That was him. That was his life. And we've all been through that, haven't we?
The simple magic of that. My favorite scene in the film is the part where the Gestapo are singing they're singing in the bar that song, the German song, there's something on the Rhine. I can't remember the name of it. And then Rick tells them to stop and starts to play the Marseillaise.
To play the Marseillaise.
And then all these people who are not French.
Sorry, go on.
All these people who are not French start jumping up and singing it just to the Gestapo, and his ex-girlfriend with tears in her eyes screaming "Vive la France." I thought that scene was beautiful.
Do you not think that was where he changed? Because it was up till then he'd been bitter and he'd been twisted, and he'd
also been compromising. He'd been compromising up to that point. That was the point where he said to the Germans, "Screw you." Without directly saying it, he said, "Screw you" to the Germans.
He did, yeah, because Victor Laszlo stood up and he said, "Play the Marseillaise," and then they all looked at Rick, and Rick just nodded. And that point where Rick nodded is where he flipped back. That very nod was it. And after that, he was on. He slowly then he started coming back on board again. And then, but the moment where Sam started playing "Tango by." Played Sam. No, I'm not playing that. He's played, and then he comes in, and there's that, and then Rick comes back into the cafe, and you hear that doom, and you can feel his heart just falling through the floor with that doom. And then he's back in the cellar, and he's of all the gin joints in all the worlds. She walks in a mine.
And the way they used the curfews in Casablanca to like signify the dark night of the soul.
Yeah, because they're all there. Everybody's, because that was the place where everybody went, wasn't it, to get
escape.
The plane to Portugal and the steamer to America. So everybody's there, stuck in purgatory between the war and freedom. So everybody there nobody there lives there. They're all, apart from the people who run the cafe, well, they're all there waiting for freedom, waiting for actually the what's it, Louis. He made all the decisions. He was the guy who gave them the transit papers, or decided whether they could go or not.
they were like ghosts stuck in a kind of a netherland. It was they were unpersons in an unreality. The more you look at and think about the film, the more powerful it gets. Also, the way it looks, the sets, that was all filmed in Hollywood in the studio. But you know, at the end when the airplane is on the field, that's a model airplane, but a large scale model airplane. It's about half size.
Yeah, and you know that they use midgets.
Yeah, middle people, dwarves. Yet they use them to look dwarves. Like. So that's what creates this. You look at that thing, and it's kind of like, that's a strange airplane, even though you know there's nothing wrong with it, and a scene, but there's not. It's half size. It's almost like to create the impression that that airplane goes to another world, especially as it flies into the fog. When it goes into the fog at the end, that was like, wow! It was like, what a touch that was. It's just it's Hollywood at its best, isn't it? You know, it's Hollywood at its best. A masterpiece.
At the time, they were throwing out one film a week as well. So to come out something like that.
And what it was up against, it was banned in Ireland. It was banned in Ireland, because Ireland was neutral in World War II, and it was seen as the government considered it anti-German propaganda, and they didn't want to piss off either the Third Reich or the Vichy government, so they banned any film that was seen as propaganda to either side. So they actually, it wasn't actually shown in Ireland until like the 60s or something. But it was banned. It was banned as a film that was considered propaganda, which it kind of was in a way. But the government didn't want to be seen promoting anything that would be either promoting either side or attacking either side.
But the Germans weren't portrayed that bad, were they? They were portrayed as the enemy, but they hadn't got to that state of later the evil Nazis and all that sort of thing. They were they still were human beings, weren't they? That you could talk to.
Yeah, Strasser was more kind of portrayed as a fanatical bureaucrat than the way it was before we knew about the Holocaust and we knew about the death camps had been liberated. So that hadn't creeped in there yet. And it's kind of refreshing almost how the Germans are shown. They're just shown as the adversary rather than the evil Nazis or stuff like that, which is, also remember in America prior to World War II, the Third Reich had a lot of support. There was a thing called the American Union League or something like that. And they were a very powerful force in the US. They were very pro-German. There's lots of Americans are of German heritage. It's actually the biggest ethnic group in the USA. So they had to play carefully. They didn't want to upset German Americans because German Americans had left to go fight for the Third Reich, lots of them, because they saw what happened in World War One. German Americans were treated appallingly in the United States, and so their children, when the war started off again, said, "I'm not going to have me treated the way my mother and father were treated in the last war." So a lot of them actually went back to Germany. So that's why I think also too there was a kind of a political delicacy that they had to play around. But yeah, I definitely suggest that's a film. You wouldn't think Casablanca esoteric. I'll tell you it is, and I'll tell you one of the reasons I know it is. That Ted Turner, who founded CNN and gave $1 billion to the United Nations in 1990. So that shows how dodgy he is. He had a channel called Turner Classics, which is where he bought all the rights to old movies, and he started colorizing black and white films. And one of the most, blasphemous acts he did was he colorized Casablanca, which is a film that's, you can tell, is specifically made to be black and white. And it basically became his curse and his downfall because no one liked him after that. It was like, you've colorized Casablanca, you've no class, no taste, nothing, just for money. And so that was an interesting aside. And so, yeah, it is an esoteric film and an occult film in the sense that it takes the story of a place full of refugees, stateless people in Casablanca in this middle of World War II, and transfers it into your own kind of psyche, because you realize that in some ways all of us are stateless people in a way, or have been stateless people. And it's very easy to say when a relationship or goes bad, I'm the good guy, she's the bad guy, he's the bad guy, she's the good woman. It's never like that. Human beings, like Jordan Peterson says, they're not evil. They're shade. They can be good, they can be bad, but they're just human beings, and that's what Casablanca really says.
So the use of light is sometimes shows that as well. I don't know if you noticed, but sometimes you'll have something like when you've got Rick talking to who's the Victor Laszlo, then you could have Rick would be like a little bit shade, a little bit in the dark, in the shadow, yet you'll have a full beam of light on Victor Laszlo. If I'd say this guy's the righteous man, and Rick's just a little bit shady. And sometimes you'll even have both, bits of light and a bit of dark, as if to say, well, like on Ingrid Bergman saying, well, she's not quite sure at the moment. And I'm sure this can't be an accident,
No, it's not. And they often use lights to show looks like it's prison bars on people's faces to show they're prisoners of the mind. Exactly. And if you notice when they're in Rick's American Cafe, his pub, it's always very, very bright to show you that Rick's is the place of refuge. It's where it's a safe place to be. Absolutely. And there's no secrets here. No one's a fake. And it's always brightly lit inside Rick's place.
One of my favorite little bits is where, because it just reminds me of things you see on the government, what they do now, is when Strasser said, shut this cafe down, he said, well, I've no excuse to shut the cafe down. Why can I do it? So he goes up to Rick and he says, shut this cafe down now. She's why? I'm amazed. I'm shocked to see that there's gambling going on in this establishment. And as soon as he said it, somebody goes, oh, you're winning. He said, oh, thank you. It's a big wad of cash in it.
And then he sells it at the end. When he sells it at the end to the other guy who's been trying to buy it for years, it's almost like that's Rick saying, my pain is gone.
Right, yeah.
It's like I'm handing off my pain. The cafe was really a place where I hide my pain and suffering.
That was about his heartbreak. Yeah,
it's gone. I passed it over, and I love that scene. The way and the guy is happy to buy it. Yeah.
What was his name? I can't remember his name, but it was.
I can't remember, but he gets a great price for it. He gets loads of money. He makes a fortune from selling the cafe, but the guy's glad to pay the money because it's the busiest place in town. But it's also like he has gained from his suffering. The whole thing of no pain, no gain. That if you process your suffering and your hurt correctly, you will gain great riches in all kinds of ways. And that's what it's just fantastic, really.
It was that thing as well. I think when Rick started turning around, remember there was a Belgian. Was it not Belgium? It was a young couple from.
Yeah, they were Belgian. They represented Belgian Jews.
Bulgaria.
They were Jews. Yeah.
Yeah, and
that was the only hint of the Holocaust kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and he let because he let the guy win because the woman had been to see Louis and traded what she had. And then Rick let the husband win.
Yeah.
And then he took a big stack of money away, and then they're all like hugging him, "Oh, you crazy Russian," and all this lot. But that was Rick was starting to show his humanity.
He had a big heart. Despite all this like tough nightclub owner, he had a huge big heart in there.
Didn't want to admit it though. I wanted to keep it down.
Yeah, because when he fell in love with Ingrid Bergman, it nearly killed him.
Yeah.
He gave his heart to Ingrid Bergman, but almost killed him.
He absolutely did. He
guarded of it.
Yeah, he was a broken man, wasn't he?
And I think a lot of men go through life like that. They have that hurt in them, and then they're afraid for the rest of their lives to be that loose about it ever again. I think that's a very common thing with men in the Western world in general. And they're not cold. They're like Rick represents every man in a way.
Oh, you could feel it, couldn't you? We've all been there at different times. Absolutely, yeah. But,
Yeah, so women, if you want to understand men, your man, observe Rick in Casablanca. He'll give you a better insight than any women's magazine article ever will.
That's very true, because it was so true to life, wasn't it? It really is. And the music showed it so much, didn't it? It just the music.
And it also showed men's real feelings, like this whole thing. It's very, he would have Bogart played a tough guy, in films, but like the film was one of the first films to really show you that men have very deep feelings too, but they're just not the same. They're processed in a very different way than women do it. They don't talk about it. They action it. They action it out.
Yeah. It's very, it's no less deep. But that film, I think the film guy, the guy was Max Steiner, wasn't he? Who did the film arrangement? They did the sound. I think he did the same. He did the it's a great big gorilla thing, King Kong as well. But
Frankenstein.
So whenever Rick was going through a really poignant time, that music absolutely fitted in perfectly. When you just, what a genius, absolute genius.
Yeah. So that was Casablanca. If people have any suggestions for films, put them down below. And if there's any film that we've both seen and we both like and see meaning in it, we'll definitely cover it in a future episode. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, there's so many to go out there, and it's good to be able to watch the film again. It gives you in these crazy lockdown times, gives you something to do, doesn't it? You can.
Well, isn't that the best art? The art that keeps talking about the now. I was watching The Rising Damp. Do you remember that with Leonard Rossiter, the sitcom?
Oh God, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, well, I have the box set of that, and my God, is that more profound than ever, And that is, I still think that's the greatest sitcom ever made. But there's so many profound truths in that sitcom, as well as just hilarious laughs,
Yeah, it's I suppose it's just, Casablanca is the same in a way, because the use of stereotypes is unapologetic, isn't it? We just stick them right in there, This is
because
Dad's Army is the same with Dad's Army.
Stereotypes exist. They do.
Stereotypes in a row, yeah. You shouldn't. Archetypes, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, exactly. And you shouldn't go around assuming that someone is a certain nationality or a certain religion, that they're absolutely that stereotype. Because you should always approach people as individuals. But in every culture, you will meet people who are the stereotype of that culture. They become almost like the archetype of the body of the culture. They do exist. They exist.
Of course they do. Yeah, that's why we know about them. They weren't made up. So next, that was great. So any films that we can, anybody's got any suggestions, we'll have a look at them. Shall we do that? Yeah.
Well, Casablanca, if you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Oh, definitely. It's by far so it's always been my favorite film, Casablanca. I can watch it time and time again, and then you see things that you haven't really seen before. Like I didn't see.
Watch it.
Yeah.
Watch it in the dark watch it in the dark with the lights off, the speakers turned up, and have a drink in your hand and lose yourself in the atmosphere.
One thing it has got a lot of atmosphere. Yeah, brilliant. I think we've actually been going for over an hour just at this, haven't we?
Good.
Have we? That's quite a lot. I don't know. I don't know what time we started.
I'm not going anywhere, so I'm all right. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I've got to be out of here by May, I think, because I've got something planned in May.
March 5th. I basically can't go anywhere.
Apart from that, it took a long time to download the video, though, won't it?
Okay, next, we're going to talk about, and this is a suggestion by Neil, about ancient processional paths. And this is an interesting one because although they exist in Britain, they also exist in Ireland, but in a different way. So I'll let you kick this one off, Neil.
Yeah, it's this whole idea that we had before, that we talked about the European megalith being of a certain type on the different islands, and even on the mainland, like the south of Spain and Portugal, but they were all different. And it seems like the islands that we inhabit here, like which is Britain and Ireland, seem to be, to me, like as if it was some sort of holy place. And the reason I say that is because it seems that there are actual processional ways, which for religious purposes, pilgrimage routes. Because I can think of, I mean, the one that springs to mind straight away is obviously the route between Stonehenge and Woodhenge, and that was definitely a pilgrimage, because they proved it by the fact that the lamb bones were only from a certain part every year, and they would wait at Durrington walls, and then it seemed like they would have a procession. And I can think of, and Avebury is another one, the Avebury Avenue. And in the north, there are two particular ones that I go and see. One is from the Devil's Arrows in Yorkshire, which is between the rivers of Swale, the River Swale, the Wither and Swale, and it's like this processional route through 2 or 3 henges until you get to the Thornborough henges at the end. Now that has to be a processional route from the Devil's Arrows, about 20 miles, and then there's one in Shap, which has now gone, which started at the Kemp Housestone Circle, and it would be for a couple of miles up to Skull Hill, where there used to be a chambered tomb, and there was a processional route actually with 70 foot wide with stones at either side. So it just seems to me that those must have been a real processional, route. And would people have come from all over Europe? Because the three henges at Thornborough all hold 2,000 people each. 6,000 people in a time, when the population wasn't as massive as it is now. So why would you need that many, a room for that many people? So I'm thinking that I just see Britain. I mean, as you travel around, I've been traveling around all the ancient sites now for 20 years, and you get an idea, and things just sort of build together.
Yeah.
It's a bit like you've got the old days where the early meeting points where there would be a big stone or something. You would call it the Gorseth, which is like the Welsh for throne, and you can see like next to Bryn Cefn in Anglesey. There's one there, a huge stone thing, and they say it's all flattened down on the top, like people. So it shows that people must have stood there for hundreds of years. And then under it, you've got the man-made site of Bryn Cefn that was built there sort of maybe 5,000 years ago, but a long time after people originally met. So different pilgrimage ideas in different areas, but it's that's why I just think Britain is, was a holy place.
Well, there's no doubt about when you see the procession at Avebury between the circles and Silbury Hill and up to West Kent, that's absolutely a processional. There's no doubt about that. It's all contemporary and built at the same time. And that would have been like a magical mystery tour back in the day. Perhaps you would have had people with lighting torches or fires on top of Silbury Hill. And, when you come over that Windmill Hill, you would catch the fire on that. It must have been incredible. I mean, and having done that a few times myself, it's you're just struck by the fact that I'm supposed to be doing it this way. And the Woodhenge and the Stonehenge thing, there's what you're saying about people from all over the world. They found the Amesbury archers and they looked at his tooth, because you can tell where someone is from by their teeth, because the water that they drink has a certain number of isotopes in it, and that's held in that grows in the tooth. And he was from Switzerland, so he had traveled all the way from He's in that great little museum besides Salisbury Cathedral. He's in there, and he had traveled all the way from Switzerland to Stonehenge. So there's your proof right there that it was an international thing. It wasn't just local. Here in Ireland, it's quite different. We don't have, megaliths wise, you don't really see too many or too much evidence of processional routes. Like, okay, you have the Boyne Valley, the Bruno Boyne megaliths now to Douth and Stone and Newgrange, but they don't seem to be connected pathwise. They seem like the structures are part of a complex. There doesn't seem to be a sense of procession. Now, there definitely was processions in ancient Christian Ireland, which were probably left over from pagan Ireland. And they generally worked around things called escoridas, which are naturally formed roads that run left to right across the country that were caused by deposits of silt and stone left by the retreating glacial ice ages. And so it's basically the edge of the glacier. And they created mounds that ran naturally across the country, left to right, east to west. And they were safer in the olden days because the country was heavily forested, and the middle of it was a dangerous bog, and it was filled with wolves. So this the safest place to be would be on the high level. So they walked on these elevated paths, and these became the kind of processional paths. And one of them leads towards Clonmacnoise, which was the easiest place to cross the Shannon in the middle of Ireland, because yourself, the Shannon is like it's the only mighty river on these islands. It's like the Rhine or the Danube. It's enormous. It's an enormous river, and it basically slices Ireland down the middle, and all the rainfall that comes into Ireland, and so it drains the entire country. Hence why it's such a huge river, and that was a place you could cross, and that was where Saint Kevin set up Clonmacnoise, the famous monastery. Now, there's lots of things to suggest he was probably a druid, because there's a strange story about how he became a Christian, that he slaughtered a bull and wore its hide and things like that. And that's all very shamanistic, pagan sounding to me. They probably rewritten the story to make it more Christian. But there was ancient trackways and paths in Ireland built with logs. Oak logs were sunk across the bogs. And Ireland had a vast road network in very ancient times of these logs, going back to the Bronze Age. Very complex road system and very well maintained. And a lot of them all led to where you've never been yet, into Rathcrogan and Cruachan in County Roscommon, which is the highest concentration of megaliths in Ireland and ancient sites. It's just that a lot of them are buried under the ground. They're mounds. There's not too many stone things. But the highest concentration of ancient archaeology in Ireland is in this area. And this is the kingdom of Queen Maeve and the legends and stuff like that. And you get the impression there's vast amount. That's where the Owen Negat cave is. And you get the impression there's a vast amount of stuff under the ground here yet to be discovered. It feels like a subterranean world. And that was actually probably the capital of Ireland in those days. And they became kind of pilgrimage routes as well. When Christianity came in, they kind of fell apart. They fell apart. But the Clonmacnoise one definitely was. It became, and also as you cross from Ireland from east to west, you go from, say, and it's amazing how it was ancient times reflect modern times. It went from Dublin to Galway. And you went from the east to the west. So you went from the land of this rising sun, the coast of the rising sun, to the coast of the setting sun. So you went from life to death. So there was a kind of you followed the sun across Ireland, and then it went to watch it go down into the Atlantic, which is very interesting, kind of a life to death, the journey of, and then you came back. And so you came back to life again, which would have been done at Stonehenge and Woodhenge, I imagine. It would have went there from the land of the living in Woodhenge to the land of the dead in Stonehenge, and then back to the land of the living, to symbolize the cycles of life. And even a cliche as that is, I think there's a lot of truth to it. There's been some recent ones speculated about a processional path between St. Bridget's Well in Kildare and Newgrange in Meath, where someone showed, and it was quite, I think it was Anthony Murphy at his Mythical Ireland group, it was quite plausible, where it showed that you could have made this processional route through a line of sight. By getting on a hill, you could see the next hill. And that way you could actually plot a line across the landscape. And there was megaliths and then very ancient churches along that route. You get that a lot in England, the ancient church along the processional route. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of Ireland's ancient processional routes have been lost, the pre-Christian ones. But I think a lot of the Christian processional routes, such as the Reek Sunday at Croagh Patrick, where they go to the top of the mountain, that was originally Croagh Crom. It was to represent the god of the last pagan god of Ireland, the Crom Cruach. That's where he represented. That's why St. Patrick became symbolic of conquering paganism there. That's definitely one that's still left, because that definitely goes back to pagan times, that one. So up the mountain and back on bare feet. But but other than that, not too many. Why do these people take these processional routes is I find much more interesting. I mean, I've talked to people who went on the Camino in northern Spain, even atheists, and instead you just feel amazing at the end of it. You just feel like you've not only crossed the landscape of northern Spain, but you've crossed the landscape inside yourself. And that's probably what
Clonmacnoise seems older to me because we go to Clonmacnoise on the first place we go actually on the island to it, and it does feel like there's an older feel to it. It's obviously a very important early Christian centre, but I can imagine it being a pagan route. It would have been a pagan, it had to be, but whether there was any sites there before, I don't know. But it's quite a place.
There's that cross there. I think they call it the North Cross, and it was pulled down the river, I think. And it's definitely not a cross because it has the god Karunas on it. So it's definitely pagan. There's also 2 round towers there, and they're very, very old-looking round towers as well. Very old-looking. They look much, much older than the Christian architecture around it.
But have you seen the old stone that's not actually, it's about 2 miles from Clonmacnoise, and it's in a field. It's got all sorts of carvings and things on it.
Oh, I know that one. I haven't seen that one, no, but that probably in the same infrastructure, yeah.
Yeah, so that is old. That is ancient. So that's really worth seeing, and it's very easy to get to. There's on the little road. There's on a small road that goes up and down. It's over a bog, isn't it? There's a sign on the side of the road pointing to it. You just go down. It's there in a field.
And you also get that lovely feeling in Clonmacnoise. There's something about it's like the same kind of feeling you get in Glastonbury Abbey. You feel relaxed. You feel relaxed. You feel, even though it's a Christian place, you don't care. You're kind of like, it doesn't matter what you are.
Holy place, isn't it?
Yeah, you feel that reverence. That reverence.
A lot of Glastonbury can feel like that, can't it? You can go either way, but it just feels sometimes you just feel a spiritual atmosphere, like a cloud of spirituality in the air. You just feel good for being there.
In Montreal, there's a cathedral in the city in Canada, in Montreal. There's a cathedral, I think it's called St. Andrew's, that's at the top of the hill. It's actually the Royal Mount that Montreal, I think, is named after, Montreal. And it's the people go up the cathedral on their kneecaps, on the steps. It's kind of like a penance thing, a Catholic penance thing. But that is another one that has a very powerful vibe to it as well. When you walk up that I'd say it's as powerful as anything you get in these islands. When you walk up that hill on those steps to the cathedral, when you get to the cathedral at the top of in Montreal, you can feel I am in an ancient place. It's not just something that was built by the Quebecois when they arrived in Montreal 200 years ago, whatever. It feels like this must have been a powerful, powerful Indian or Native American or something before that location. You feel it so strongly, so strongly.
There's something to be said for the journey making the arrival. That's why I like to drive sometimes down to the south of France rather than fly. There's something about the journey that makes getting there more important. It's like when you walk up to Queen Maid's Cairn as well. You put a lot of energy into getting there. So when you do finally get there, you think, yeah, this has been worth it. It's part of the putting yourself through the journey.
Yeah, there's if you're living your right. I mean, I always said I'm a great believer in adventures, and I always say to people that an adventure, if you've done a journey correctly, it becomes a combination of an adventure and a pilgrimage, no matter where you go. And I think that's the secret to traveling well. is to don't go on journeys, go on adventures, and don't go sightseeing, go on pilgrimages, no matter where you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll never really know whether the sites in England are for that purpose, but they feel like it to me, you know. And then I suppose that takes you right back to the whole Atlantis thing, you know, whether that was. But we spoke about that many times, but it does make you think, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if anybody has any experiences on these kind of pilgrimage routes or something, or know of any we don't know about, let us know in the comments below. And this is an interactive series of programs we're doing that you're just as much a part of it as we are. And so, you know, I know the comments can be very active. And, you know, tell us what you know, because everyone has their stories. Yeah, and so I think we'll close this one up, Neil. Now, we've had a good show. And don't forget to subscribe to both channels and to
please do,
yeah, the notification button on both channels, and to share the videos from each channel. And that way we, you know, I don't think that many people are doing this on YouTube or bouncing it off. I think it's a good idea. We're building a kind of a parallel reality here in many ways, I think, a mini network. And it's, you know, that's the way to do it. So, Neil, I'll see you next time, and for more of the same, and hopefully we'll have more positive news about this bloody lockdown.
Oh God, fingers crossed, everything crossed. So okay, brilliant. Been good.
Slán, Matt. Bye.